Falcon Shock's 2-inch lift system for the Toyota Tacoma delivers increased stability and control and improved comfort and ride quality both on and off-road. They fit all Tacoma models from 2015 to the present. Changing the front shocks requires removal of the front coilover assemblies. It is easier to remove both sides at the same time. However, this video only shows the steps on the driver or left side of the vehicle. Raise the vehicle and remove the wheels and tires. Detach the ABS line and brake line brackets. Disconnect the tie rod by removing the cotter pin and then the nut. If the pin on the ball joint won't release, strike the knuckle with a hammer to loosen it. Remove the nut connecting the sway bar link to the knuckle and detach the sway bar link. You will need to swing the sway bar out of the way, so detach the sway bar link on the other side of the vehicle as well. Disconnect the upper control arm ball joint from the knuckle, remove the cotter pin and loosen the nut, but do not remove it. Again, use a hammer and strike the knuckle to loosen it. Mark the tower, isolator, and the spring before removing the coilover assembly from the tower. Aligning these at reinstallation will ensure the spring is reinstalled in the correct position. Remove the 3 upper nuts on the coilover assembly. Remove the lower nut and bolt, then remove the coilover assembly from the vehicle. Before installing the front Falcon shocks, you will need to determine the desired ride height. The Tacoma shocks have 3 options: medium, level, and heavy accessory. The shocks are preset to level. This setting will eliminate the need for leveling spacers. The heavy accessory setting is designed for those with heavy bumpers, winches, or other accessories. This setting will maintain a level ride height even with increased weight. Medium puts the ride height as close to the stock ride height as possible. Because of the Falcon Shock's heavy-duty design, it is not possible to set the Falcon Shocks to the stock ride height on the Tacoma. Place the front bump stops onto the shaft with the wide end towards the top. After the ride height has been determined, have a qualified mechanic separate the spring from the original shock and install the spring onto the Falcon Shock body. Be sure the grease zerk aligns with the center of the gap between the 2 outer studs. Apply anti-seize and run the shaft nut on, then remove the shock from the compressor. Torque the nut to 40 foot-pounds. We found the best way to torque this nut is to use a 19mm crowfoot wrench on the nut and keep the shaft from spinning using an 8mm wrench. Remove the front skid plate to access the front sway bar brackets. Remove the bracket bolts using 14mm. Use blue thread lock on one of the factory bolts just removed and one of the provided socket head bolts. Slide the relocation bracket into place with the elongated hole towards the rear. Install a socket head bolt into the recessed hole and the factory bolt into the elongated hole. Tighten both bolts to 37 foot-pounds. Loosely install one of the short bolts with a washer into the rear mounting hole. Position the slotted end of the sway bar bracket into the bolt. Install the second short bolt with the washer. Torque both of these bolts to 37 foot-pounds. Take care not to over-tighten these bolts. The relocation bracket is aluminum and can be damaged from over-tightening. With the grease zerk facing the wheel, install the upper studs into the strut tower. Set the lower eyelid into place and use the factory hardware. Torque to 61 foot-pounds. Return to the top and torque these nuts to 47 foot-pounds. Reattach the upper control arm to the knuckle by pushing down with a pry bar. Feed the nut onto the ball joint and torque to 81 foot-pounds. You may need to tighten a little more to install the cotter pin. Always tighten the nut, never back it off. Reconnect the sway bar link to the knuckle and torque to 52 foot-pounds. Reconnect the tie rod. Again, you may have to tighten a little more to install the cotter pin. Reinstall the ABS and brake line brackets. Support the rear axle and remove the factory shocks. Loosen the nuts on the U-bolts. Remove the U-bolts on one side, allowing the U-bolt plate to be removed. Remove the factory U-bolts and bump stop. Lower that side enough to install the leaf spring block. Insert the alignment pin into the leaf spring block. Set the block onto the axle mount in between the leaf spring and the axle. Make sure the alignment pin drops into the hole on the axle mount. Raise the axle back up and align the pin on the leaf spring with the hole on the block. Set the Falcon bump stop mount onto the leaf spring. Place the new longer U-bolts over the tabs on the bump stop mount. Use the factory U-bolt plate and attach it to the U-bolts using the provided hardware. Keep an eye on the U-bolts and make sure they stay on the bump stop mount tabs. Tighten the U-bolts, but keep them a little loose while you install the leaf spring block on the other side. After both leaf spring blocks and bump stop mounts are installed, final tighten the nuts on the U-bolts. Lubricate the bump stop with a silicone-based lubricant and install by pushing down while twisting. Falcon shocks for the Tacoma are available in a Sport or a Sport tow haul option, while the front shock remains the same for both kits. The rear shocks for the Sport tow haul feature a 3-position fast adjust knob that allows you to select from one of the 3 options: comfort and control, moderate tow haul, or heavy tow haul. Installation for the Sport and Sport tow haul is the same. Drill out the upper shock mount hole to 7/8 of an inch so the bushings fit correctly. Attach the roost guards to the rear Falcon shocks. Use blue thread lock on the bolt and tighten it to 30 inch-pounds. Install the rear Falcon shock. Make sure the alignment tab faces out. Support the rear axle and set the lower eyelet into the shock bracket. Use the factory hardware and torque to 74 foot-pounds. Return to the top and torque this nut to 15 foot-pounds. An alignment tab for the factory tires has been included in this kit. To install the shocks with the alignment tab for the factory tires, you will need to trim part of the shock mounts to allow space for the shock reservoir. Measure over 1 3/4 inches from the corner and 1 inch down from the top and mark it. Drill a 1/2 inch hole. Because of the hardness and thickness of the shock bucket, it's best to drill the hole in steps. Make the vertical cut parallel to the vehicle's frame. The horizontal cut should wind up flush with the rest of the shock bucket opening. On the driver's side, there is an additional bracket inside the shock bucket which will need to be trimmed. There's no measurement for this, just cut it at a diagonal. When the cutting is complete, clean the sharp edges with a grinder. Install the shocks as shown earlier, but using the alignment tab for the factory wheels.